Do you want the right sink for your kitchen? With so many options on the market and so many preferred uses, it's really hard to pin down what the perfect sink choice is for me and my kitchen. I'm going to tell you what the perfect choice is, and we can battle it out in the comments later. Just remember to keep it light. Here are the most common sink options available, and why you should or shouldn't choose one. Starting off with the small single. A small single is meant to fit in a sink base of 24 inches to 30 inches. Of course, you can fit it in any size sink base, really. And the only real reason I can figure of why you would actually want to have a small single sink is just because you don't have room for anything else. So if you have a smaller kitchen, or you're trying to replace a sink in a sink base that's already smaller, you might not have an option for a larger sink. And so therefore you have to go with a small single sink. Really, there's nothing wrong with a small single sink other than they're just smaller. They're still quite functional, and they leave you with more counter space around the sink area. The other reason is you just like the look of a small single sink, and that's just the look you're going for, and you don't really have the need in your kitchen for a great big ginormous sink. In my experience with sinks, having an attached drain board on a small single would come in really handy. Try to get the largest single that you can fit in the base cabinet that you have. So if you have a 30-inch base cabinet, try to max that out and go with a 27-inch single sink. And I'm not talking about the small little prep sinks that go in an island or maybe in a butler pantry. I'm just meaning about your main kitchen sink. The standard double. These are double sinks, obviously, meant to fit in a cabinet anywhere from really 33 inches and up. And in my personal opinion, the least functional kitchen sink on the market. What? Are not two bowls better than one? You'd kind of think, and in some circumstances, yes, having a double sink is a real convenience, especially if you enjoy washing your dishes by hand. And you need to have one bowl filled with water and one bowl for rinsing or drying or for whatever. They also come in very handy if you want to have a disposal system attached to your sink, so that you have one bowl that's empty with the disposal underneath and one bowl that you can fill up and use and have filled with water. The reason I say they're not as functional is because each bowl is normally smaller than even a one single bowl for a single sink. So you have two smaller bowls that really, they're not that great. You can't fit anything big in there. You can't hand wash anything large. And in the age of dishwashers, many people really don't need that double sink. Now, my parents' generation grew up and are very used to having one side of their sink filled with water while the other side is empty and used for other purposes. But in my generation and others, we don't tend to do that so much. When we had a double sink, we'd never fill it with water and just let it go cold and get gross. To me, it's just disgusting, but that's just what I see people doing. However, if that's what you do, then it's a perfect choice for your kitchen. Now, you can get doubles that are sink and a halves so that you do have one larger bowl and one smaller bowl. I remember having a sink and a half one time. It had a great big large single bowl, which was pretty useful, and this tiny little bowl on the side, which I don't know what it was for. You could rinse a vegetable in it, but you can rinse a vegetable in any sink. You don't need to have it like minuscule. It all comes down to how you use your kitchen and what you prefer, and maybe even sometimes just what you're used to. If you're used to a double sink, you like how it functions, and you're looking for a new sink, then maybe go ahead and just get another double sink. When I had a double sink, it just wasn't that great. It was a really nice sink. It was granite. It was beautiful, but it was like two small bowls, not really what we wanted. When we switched to the next sink I'm going to talk about, it was much more beneficial for us. So get the sink that really works for your lifestyle. Think about this next option, which is a large single. The large single, as big as a double sink, fits the same size cabinet, but with one bowl. The most functional type of kitchen sink, in my opinion, that is on the market. Here's why. Washing pots and pans and roasters and cutting boards and large dishes and anything oversized in one large single bowl is so convenient. Now, this is not the sink for you if you like to hand wash your dishes or are used to filling up your sink with water. If that's the case, you're probably not going to want a large single because, one, that's a huge amount of water to try to fill up, and two, that's it. Your sink is just, that's all you can do. It's just water. You can't do anything else. All the other functions that you are so used to doing, you can't do because the sink's filled with water. If you have a dishwasher or you're just not a hand washer, you don't care about filling up a sink, you're just gonna rinse your dishes, or you like to scrub big things and have the convenience of not having them tilted all every different way, then this is the sink that you might want to consider. Now, I've had every kind of sink out there just about. I've had a single, I've had a sink and a half, I've had a double, I now have a large single, and I have to say that the large single for us in particular, has been the most useful, the most functional, and the sink we enjoy the most, if you can enjoy sinks. When you're shopping for a large single, try to find the drain hole that's in the back, left, or right. Especially if you're right-handed, go for the drain hole on the right-hand side. Because if you attach some kind of disposal system to that drain and you're scraping off dishes, it's much more convenient that you're scraping them off onto the right-hand side. And if you're using your large single with an attachment like that, it makes it a little easier. Normally these sinks are tapered on the bottom so that water flows towards the drain. Plus, when you put a roaster or a large dish in the bottom of that sink, it's not covering the drain. Most of these sinks now come with, or you can buy as a separate attachment, a grid for the bottom, and it allows things to dry in that sink in the event that you want to put something in there. It drips dry right in the sink. Now let's talk about, okay, before we talk about anything else, I just first want to say thank you for those of you who voted on this little poll that I put out the other day, asking you what you would prefer, a standard double sink or a large single sink. To my surprise, 71% of you voted on the large single, which I thought was interesting because I do get a lot of comments about how much more functional a double sink is compared to a large single. So thank you very much if you voted. Getting that input from you is really helpful. Now, one commenter did mention that they have what's called a low divide sink, and it's basically a sink that has a shallow depth divider between the two bowls. It's a double sink, but because of the shallow depth of the divider, you can put a large pot or a roaster in there and still wash it, and you do whatever you need to do with it. And you still have the use of two shallower bowls for filling up water. I think this is a pretty good mix. A lot of companies are coming out with these options in recent years, just so that consumers can have the best of both worlds. If you don't want a full-on double and you don't want a full-on single, you can kind of have a little bit of both. So Melissa, thank you very much for commenting on that so I can bring this information to everyone else. This might be a really good option for you. All right, now back to the video. What I think could be the most functional sink on the planet, and that is the Workstation Sink. They're like any other sink in that you can get them as a single, a double, or a large single. They come in an apron front or undermount or top mount, whatever you want, but they have all these accessories that come with it, meant to fit seamlessly into the design of the sink. So you have a cutting board, you might have a colander or some kind of strainer, you might have some kind of sorting baskets or other types of things where you can, use as part of a workstation. And so it's not just a sink, but it's also a place where you can actually use it for more than just a sink. So if you're chopping or if you're doing other things with prepping food, it's a great surface for that. Plus you can get them up to like 60 inches or more. You can get them with dual faucets so that if you have a multi-person kitchen where you have two cooks in there all the time and it's a high traffic area, having two faucets going, having this extra workspace can be very beneficial. I mean, even in a small kitchen, you can cover up part of that sink as being a worktop and not have to worry about it just being a sink. Workstation sinks have been around for decades. They just weren't really called that for decades. They were just sinks with a bunch of attachments. I had one years ago. It had a cutting board that sat on one side, had a little colander that sat in the other side, and it was cool. We never used those things at all. They were just tucked away under the sink base and we just used it as a sink, but it was a workstation sink. But now companies have been really upping the game to make these more of a feature, more of a look, more of something that's very stylish and looks really cool in the kitchen. And for that reason, they're more popular with consumers. If you think you're going to use all these extra accessories, then by all means, go for it. But if they're just going to be tucked away under a cabinet somewhere, this probably isn't the sink for you. Unless you just like the massive size sink that you can get with these, then maybe that's an option. But just remember, you're going to be paying more, and a lot of these manufacturers, you can pick the accessories that you want. So if you want two of these and one of these, and you can mix and match kind of what you want to have for your sink. You can customize the sink for you and your needs. There's one more sink type that I need to mention because I basically just want to warn you about it so that you don't end up having one of these, and that's the 90-degree corner sink. The only time you should have a sink in your corner is if the cabinet itself is 45, whether the full makeup of the cabinet or a regular cabinet turned on a 45-degree angle with a regular sink, whatever type you want. If you're putting in a corner sink in a 90-degree corner-based cabinet, no. There's two reasons why I don't prefer these kind of sinks, and really if that was my only option to have in my own kitchen, I'd probably just say, you know what, let's just forget the sink. Let's just forego that. I'll use a bucket. Now, I know there's some of you out there that probably have these, and I am sorry for you, but I'm only basically teasing as well, so don't take it offensively. However, there are two reasons why I'm not a fan of these as a designer. One has to do with the countertop choice that you have. So if you have laminate countertop, having a 90-degree corner sink is a really bad idea because that laminate is gonna get destroyed. It doesn't matter who installed that countertop, doesn't matter how good they were, it doesn't matter what glue they used, I don't care if they welded it together. Water is going to get in that seam and water is going to destroy that countertop. And the number two reason, because of the shape of the corner base, water tends to really splash everywhere on the floor, on the cabinet, and on you because of that 90-degree corner. And the faucet swings between both, and in between those two bowls is just basically this flat area that's just water's gonna splash everywhere. And yes, you can just turn the faucet on and go to the other side. But if you've had one of these sinks, you know, you got the water on, you turn the faucet to the other side and water's just going everywhere. It's just not good. Lots of choices for sinks. Maybe you've decided, hey, you know what? I think I want a double, or I want a large single, or I want a workstation, whatever it is. But what material should that sink be made of? Well, I'm gonna answer that question in this video. Please consider subscribing if you like my content. Bye. If you'd like me to design your kitchen, check the link in the description below for all the details.